All right, and we are back. As a quick recap, Cynic did progress to semifinals, and we are going to be seeing Petroleum versus Cynic, and I believe we are going to be seeing Petroleum kill against Cynic's Survivor team, and we saw Ultra kill, but now we're going to be seeing Ultra survive. Do you think they're going to be able to make it to the final rounds, Odds?
I'm not gonna lie, I'm not as familiar with American competitive teams as I am with the European ones, who I've sparred with or seen them more often. But from my understanding, these are easily two of the top NA teams at the moment. So to assume that any one of them has an advantage over the other, I think would be really, really difficult. It's going to be a really tight one. We are now at the semifinals. This is the round for the strongest killers to come out to play. And honestly, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really, really tough. We're only going to be watching one of the two ongoing matches, but I know it's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah, it really is going to be, and especially as we're going into semifinals right now, and for those of you who don't know what that means, it means the S-tier killers are coming out to play on the Father Campbell's Chapel. So I'm expecting to see nothing but Nurse, but maybe we're going to get a treat and we're going to see some Blight instead.
Well, Blight, unfortunately, is a little bit limited by our rules. Quick recap of the rules. We're going to be going to a already selected map, Father Campbell's Chapel, tough map, but with 4 possible killers to choose from, all of which are very strong. Nurse is perhaps the most obvious pick, stupid strong killer. Blight is limited by the add-on selection since we can go up to yellow, so it's a little bit trickier, but could also kick serious butt. And I know we have a really strong Blight player in one of these teams, Petroleum. And then we have Spirit, which is not quite as strong, but can honestly do quite a lot of damage with yellow add-ons, and Huntress, which might be seen by a specialist, but I don't think we have that type of player here. I think you were right on the money. It's going to be probably just Nurse. On the Survivor side, yellow items and add-ons all across. We expect 1 yellow toolbox, 1 yellow medkit, 1 yellow flashlight, which, by the way, is very useful against Nurse. Using that flashlight well might be the difference between a chase ending much sooner. Yeah, it's a really tough one. All perks are allowed on Killer. All perks are allowed on Survivor, although no duplicates. And this is going to be a tough uphill battle for Survivors.
Yeah, it really is, and you put the nail in the head with pointing out the flashlights and how pivotal they are going to be this match. You actually pointed out when you were doing a overview of our EU semifinals of how Ace was trying to light burn the Nurse to avoid that second blink, and I think we're going to see it here again. It is a staple of DbD comp, and I am not going to be surprised in the slightest if we see it coming out in full force, and who knows, maybe someone here is going to be able to pull out some tricks and tricks.
We had a quick glimpse at everyone's builds, and I see some fascinating things. Now, killers that run Lethal Pursuer, believe it or not, are not crazy. They simply want to have the best possible chance at getting the best possible chase going on early on, and that can set the tone for the rest of the game. This killer has perfect information of what everyone is doing. Excellent life from Nancy that unfortunately does not give enough distance to dodge this attack, and she's in a bad spot. She's in a really bad spot. There's no comp corner. This is a very quick hook happening this early, and the sad part is there's not much to do against this. This is Nurse.
Yeah, I mean, they did the right thing. They went to edge map, and a lot of people always wonder, why do survivors go to the edge of the map against Nurse? And it's kind of like if you've ever played chess, putting a knight on the edge of the board, because it limits the Nurse's movement in some really unique ways. I also want to point out here a score event that just popped up where you saw a damage generator after hook, that there is in fact a Scourge Hook Pain Resonance in play.
I mean, you did not even need to see the score. The fact that we had a hook right next to the down Survivor, but somehow the killer decided not to go for it, already tells you that they went out of their way to get that. That is Cal O'Brien. Eruption applied on that gen. This Nancy has a target painted on her back, and she needs to do her best around that. Good luck. I don't think this is easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to really do much. We do see the down underneath the pallet almost made very personal. Maybe this could be a setup, and sure enough, there's the Meg, but they aren't able to get it!
No, okay, the idea here wasn't crazy. Believe it or not, our Nancy, I'm pretty sure, has the perk Power Struggle and Flip Flop. I'm pretty sure that what they were going for here is actually a very sound and solid strategy, where after a few seconds, Nancy would literally be unhookable. Unfortunately, it seems like the mech player thought the pallet save could occur, and he was just a slight inch away from happening. A real huge shame. Also, this ace has been useless for a few seconds, having been hit by eruption, being completely... My god, what a blink. Completely unable to do anything for a few seconds, and this nurse has an insane grip on this team already.
Yeah, I mean, and we're seeing the nurse just capitalize off this snowball pressure, not wanting to give these survivors a single inch, slugging out the ace, slugging out the Meg. You know they're gonna tunnel out the Nancy too, and it comes down to the Quentin to somehow bring it all back unless there's an unbreakable on one of these down survivors.
I was expecting Nancy to perhaps use the light that she seemingly had. Oh my god, you cannot use life if you're cut in half. She will be unceremoniously tunneled here. Yeah, lucky us, we're at 4 gens, huh? Believe it or not, it's not time for the survivors to give up. It is entirely possible that on the other side, their killer is doing even better than this, somehow, if it's even possible. So any gen they get done, any progress they do at all could be the difference that makes the tiebreaker go their way. So survivors, despite this grim start, cannot give up just yet. They need to get any gens done.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing we say about all the time. With COTF, we run a lot of data on every single match that is played here. And one of the things that we pointed out time and time again, it's not how many survivors escape against Nurse, it's how many gens you get completed. And that is always the fact of the matter. And I think we're going to see that here today as well, as I'm imagining both sides, they're going to 4K with Nurse. The question is, how many gens do each side complete? And this Nurse is not wanting to give them a single inch whatsoever.
Looks like she looked up to the sky for a split second, doing a quick little prayer, but honestly, I think God is on your side, Nurse. You're doing fantastic. I would not want to be in the Survivor team right now. This looks like an insane amount of pressure, some of it alleviated by the deliverance on Meg, which allowed her to unhook herself and start doing gens again, but this next chase could be very short.
Yeah, I don't think Nia's in the match, but she's definitely looking down proud on the Nurse today, as, you know, the entity is pleased with the death and destruction that they're seeing here on Father Campbell's Chapel, and Nurse just once again going for that slug out on the ace, not wanting to give these survivors any moments of respite. Seeing those scratch marks, and it looks like it is on an injured survivor. I think that is the Meg who is still broken after that deliverance play.
Yeah. The trade-off of using deliverance and unhooking yourself is that you cannot be healed for a whole 60 seconds. And that means that even if she had a medkit, which she doesn't, could not have used it during this time. It is a brutal, brutal place to be. And I think our killer would rather leave the ace on the ground and secure a second hook on someone to make sure that they have zero chance to come back. A little bit of a frustration wiggle there. What would you call that little camera shake that killers do when they know they messed up?
Yeah, it is just like that shake of disapproval, like, what am I doing? Shaking my head, trying to, like, clear out the thoughts. And we saw the Meg try with the flashlight there, but just not enough distance. I do want to point out here, though, that was the longest chase we've seen this entire game. Mick doing a really great job of using line of sight blockers to trip up the Nurse and double back.
Yeah. There are unfortunate times when even a chase this long against Nurse will mean very little, and this Nurse has overperformed to the point where she can afford this kind of chase right now. And unfortunately, the other two survivors had to pick up the person from the ground. They could not be sitting on gens this whole time, and I wouldn't be surprised if this Nurse somehow manages to keep us at 3 gens for the foreseeable future. This looks tough. This looks tough to play as.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the survivors did get a gen during that period of time, so definitely not making waste of the time that the Meg gave them. The question is now whether or not they're A, going to be able to unhook the Meg, and B, even if they do, will it matter? We see Ace trying to come in, and I think another reason why we're seeing the Nurse slug them out is I think they are under the assumption that Ace is the deliverance player, but now we saw from Meg that they aren't. Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, they're just going to slug out the next survivor that they have on the ground, go for the 4K, and that's going to be that.
If I may go for an alternate analysis of that situation, if you know that Meg has deliverance, it's almost a safe assumption that she also has unbreakable. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. The disrespect. So if you know that your one unbreakable is on someone else, slugging the ace does seem like a good idea. And honestly, seeing the results, who can argue? This was absolutely the way to play this. The micro and macro from the Snurs are literally out of this world. This has been insane.
Yeah, absolutely. We see Quentin back here trying to complete this generator. Actually has it on 3 cylinders, so pretty far along. However, as mentioned earlier, Colubrine Eruption going to be bringing that down by 2.5% on the initial kick, 200% per second thereafter. And if they get the down, it's going to be additional 10% in potential incapacitation on a survivor on it. I mean, unless they complete that gen now, that is going to be that.
It's insane. On a match that looks this promising for Nurse, she still has to also fight. It's not just good enough to get 4 kills. You want to get 4 kills with the shortest, sorry, with the least amount of generators completed.
Yeah.
So it's crazy how tense this still is.
And I think that's the biggest thing why we're seeing Nurse not really commit the chases, because there's a little bit concerned. They understand that the other Nurse is going to probably get a 4K as well. In fact, the game might already be over for all we know. And so now the Nurse is playing around the idea of, I need to restrict as many gens as possible. And we see Colubrine popping off in the distance. We see back-to-back notifications, which we just did. That is 2 survivors on that one gen.
Yep. That's pretty crazy. Safe assumption, and all of you watching at home need to remember that both games are played simultaneously. The killer from one side, the killer from the other, playing at the same time. So it's very possible that this killer is on comms or receiving information from their team as to what they have to do. Maybe at some point they'll decide that the result is good enough. Until then, they have to assume that they need to get the best possible result. Very nice play from Quentin, who honestly just got lost somewhere.
Yeah, just absolutely disappeared into the ether. For all I know, and I wasn't paying attention when they were in chase before, but it could have been a lucky break potentially. But we also see what looks to be a noise notification on the other side of the carnival.
This is crazy. They want to they want to do 2 different gens that are as far apart as it gets in a map of this size, and the Nurse is keeping up with them. It is ridiculous. They did the gen closer to Shag. Could they possibly get to 1 gen? That, believe it or not, might be the difference. That might be what sets this team apart. And our Nurse, despite the really good start, might actually feel like they're underperforming.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the insane part. The Nurse in any, way, shape, or form is playing amazing. But in a competitive scenario where every single generator counts, every single moment counts, the Nurse here is probably pulling out their hair, trying to find this last survivor. And fact of the matter is, the gen split here is still really, really strong for survivors.
They might somehow manage to do more gens. It is crazy. It is absolutely crazy.
Yeah,
that you can win, but this might not be a good enough win.
Yeah, I mean, and we're seeing a skill check miss there. That's 10% off the generator for the skill check miss. But based on how far along that gen is, I wonder if that's just bait.
That was bait, yeah. You can, if you are unaware, if you're on a generator and you want to blow it up as quickly as possible, you can literally spam your spacebar constantly, and the moment you get a skill check, it will blow up even sooner than normal. And it is a good way to wake up against Freddy, and it is a good way sometimes to take attention away from a teammate and onto yourself if you're in a good spot. It might have been exactly what happened here, honestly. They have set up a boon, and these 2 warriors are the last remaining survivors of their team, and they are not giving it up. It's so tense. It's been awesome to see something like this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really shows what you can do with really well-trained survivors who know every single nook and cranny of this map, know how to draw the killer's attention from one side to the other. And I mean, we're seeing just how powerful even 2 survivors left in the match can be, depending on where the generators are. If this is a 3 gen, there's no question to ask. It's done and dusted. But with
100%.
how the gens were split throughout this match as they're completing them, it really does put these survivors in a really favorable position.
It's not just that. We've been watching this Nurse's point of view the entire time, and I could swear she played that flawlessly. And it's really hard to understand when exactly she started to make a mistake, or when exactly things went wrong. Definitely that is a small mistake in chase that will delay. The boon has been her to our left, but it needs to be ignored. She cannot afford another gen to go. With this grip on the game, excellent play from Quentin. We have a bit of a spectator bug. Don't worry about this. I'm sure she will. Oh. Never mind. How to reset.
Yeah, you know, just the manual reset. Just need to sometimes swing your weapons, like turn it off, turn back on again. Kind of resets the mind of every nurse. You know, it is
we've
what
all
it is.
been there. We've all been there. We have that seems to me like a missed skill check as well.
Yeah, it did seem that way. I wasn't paying attention if it was a miss skill check or call a brine notification, but basically saw no aura. I'm gonna say miss skill check. Maybe Ace just trying to leave a little bit early here in order to avoid the chase, and Ace trying to use the rock here. This is another thing that survivors, especially those who play against Nurse, know all too well. Tight loops around kind of awkward obstacles like rocks or Z-walls can really mess up the Nurse and their blinks.
Yep. So the reason why, for those of you unaware, is that the nurse cannot blink to your exact location. She cannot blink inside you. That means that if you occupy a tight spot, she will instead fail a blink. And we have seen that happen a couple times, but not this time. This time we had a perfect follow-up. I don't know what is Quentin thinking, but they have done really well. If they hide long enough, another 2 minutes, and that person will bleed out on the ground, and maybe they can get hatch. Why would you do at this point if you were Quentin?
I mean, really speaking, so this is where it gets a bit interesting. We saw a few different scenarios of things like this where survivors can actually use bleed out to their advantage, but normally it's when you know where hatch is. And some other comp events, you know, hatch will be decided that it's spawned at Shack, for example. But we see here Quentin and Ace either using Unbreakable or getting the pickup, not even worried whatsoever. So I'm thinking that they could either go one of two ways of this. Either they stealth out, wait for the bleed out, or they do exactly what they're doing, go for the pickups when Nurse goes to check for gens, and they understand they can't really just sit back in Shack because then they risk Quentin doing gens. So they pick up the Ace, they disperse, they extend another chase, and maybe they get some more work on the gens. I think these survivors know at this point that this last gen is make or break.
Can I take a minute to point out just absolutely how on point this Quentin has been? Goodness gracious, those double backs. I am speechless. He has played ridiculously well, forcing the nurse to second guess herself and brute force every single one. It does look like you were right and we have a lucky break user. Because maybe he got some of that lucky break back from healing. Yeah, no blood, no scratch marks. Oh, the battle of the mine. Okay, that was a bit of an interesting back and forth. An eruption triggered, revealing the location of Ace. This might be it. One good blink to reveal his location and not lose him, and it's over. He's healthy, however.
Yeah, and so that's going to be the question of the day. Can the Nurse find the Ace by the time he gets away? And we do see scratch marks here, so Nurse has at least some inclination of where the Ace might be. We're seeing them fade away. I think they're heading towards Quentin, thinking that the Nurse was going to check over in Carnival. We saw them there over by the LT wall, and I don't think they're going to have enough time to get Quentin off the ground.
No, in fact, we saw Quentin reveal by the Yellow Tooth add-on that reveals survivors while they are being healed. Funnily enough, it can also be used while people are on the ground. It could have been really cute. Honestly, it could have been the start of another 20-minute bleed out session, but no, it looks like this is going to be it.
Yeah, these competitors not wanting to give up at all, hoping that their results will claim them victory and grant them a showing at finals. We saw the Ace with the Dead Heart at the pallet, trying to get a little bit of extra distance, but I think that there will be it. I think we're seeing a 4K here for Petroleum's Nurse.
I have to say, if you go back and watch those last two blinks, notice the angle that the Nurse found, the precise place where she blinked to see as much as possible around every corner to not have to guess and instead just make sure you have the survivor you want them. That is what sets really good nurses apart from your average nurse. Incredible performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did get a quick update in regards to the other match. It looks like it resulted in a 2K8 hook for Cynic's killer, meaning that Petroleum's Nurse will walk away with the 4K and bring Petroleum to the finals of the NA Dead by Daylight Community Cups.
And all of that on a below average killer that doesn't get that many kills on the kill rate. It's very impressive. Very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. So really good showing here by both teams. A really thorough breakdown of what these two sides can do, whether you're a killer or survivor, just bringing out all the stops in. You were right, by the way. That was, in fact, flip-flop and power struggle we saw in Nancy earlier. So that was why the med came by to harass the Nurse a little bit.
Yeah, one question I noticed in the chat, why do killers not run a lot of info perks? You don't have to. Based on how survivors play, you can often expect them to always do the optimal thing. And honestly, that flip-flop power struggle play could have been brilliant. It could have been brilliant. It is a shame that we didn't get to see it, but well played to either side, honestly. That was a joy to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And looks like we will be waiting just a little bit for the finals as the other teams are going to be wrapping up before we are able to see Petroleum versus. Looks like we're waiting on either Karma, Original, or Necron. So we'll have to wait and see what team ends up facing against Petroleum's Killer and Survivor team on the Azarov's resting place, which, speaking of, I want to get your opinion on something. The killer pool for Azarov's is Mastermind, Twins, Artist, and Oni. If you were in their shoes in the finals, who you're bringing here today?
If I was in their shoes, I would pick the right one. If I was in my own shoes, I don't know, actually. I do think that Oni has a lot of explosiveness that might just be what you need when you're really, really desperate and need the 4 kills. We have seen that in a previous edition of this Community Cups to a great effect. We have also seen on the European ones earlier a Mastermind absolutely dominate, but that did come after a really good early chase. With a bit of a bad early chase, both Mastermind, Oni, and almost anything in this roster can get really, things can get really difficult. I know some players swear by Twins. Their add-ons that are available aren't too bad. I personally would probably go for Artist, but then again, you do have some of her strongest add-ons locked behind the rules. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the fact that all of these killers are roughly on a similar level, and it honestly just depends on which one you feel most confident with, is probably a good sign, and probably very stressful for survivors too, not knowing 100% which killer they have to face.
Yeah, honestly, I'm kind of hoping for an artist. One of my favorite things is always to see like top tier artists play, knowing exactly how to use their dire crows. And though the artist does not have access to severed hands, which is one of the most common add-ons that we see in Dead by Daylight comp, they do have the Tar and Carrion, which can be instrumental throughout the match in order to get injures or downs with the dire crows.
It looks like, other than Oni, every killer here has an amazing set of yellows and browns. We have the toy sword on Twins, we have the gloves, the loose crank, the Ouroboros tendril on Wesker. There's plenty of options, and I think that's what makes this grand finals, so exciting. We really don't know what we're gonna get, and all of these killers are difficult to play and difficult to play against for different reasons, but all of them have their quirks. I have seen all of these killers kick ass in this map before, all of them, and I believe in whatever we get. I personally also would love to see an artist because she's perhaps the least common out of all of these that you see in tournaments, but I'll take what I get.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think either ways, we're going to be seeing some really amazing play from both killers and survivors alike. So no matter who they pick, it's definitely going to be a treat. But I will say, if it being on ARP, it is going to be a bit of a slog. You saw it during the EU finals, where teams were just...
It definitely dragged on for a long time. It played out similar to what we just witnessed. A killer that wants to defend one side and takes a chase on one side and then goes back to the gens to not lose them. It was really, really difficult to watch, just knowing how much stress was on both sides. If we have to describe Azarov's resting place to our viewers, you need to understand that this is a map that has 2 very well-defined halves. Each of them typically has enough gens so that you can sit there and defend them, potentially a basement even in some situations. And the thing is, the center is very narrow and it's very easy to control, and that is something that you have to avoid giving the killer. You cannot let the killer have everyone on a chokehold where everyone is injured and no one can make it through. And we see that happen routinely, and it is as difficult to play around as it is to avoid sometimes. Your first chase with whatever killer you play will be extremely, extremely important here, and we can expect to see the usual suspects in terms of perks. We will have Deadlock, we will have Eruption, we will have Call of Brand, we will have Corrupt, depending on the options. And survivors will have to bring perks that can adapt to everything. Although perhaps at this level, maybe they know more than we do. Maybe they already have a bit of a guess as to what killer they're going to face.
So we saw a really interesting build the other day on Artis, because with DbD Comp and Champions of the Fog, we restrict per killer, like what perks they can use, what perks they can't, because some killers, like Nurse, for example, are absolutely nuts with Eruption, for example. But with Artis, we saw something really interesting the other day, and it worked out really well, and I'm curious to see if we might see it here again today if we do see an Artis. We saw Artis with Merciless Storm, and it allows the Artis to just absolutely dominate the match as they are tossing survivors off of gens, forcing them to regress it by 10% and then block it thereafter by the entity blocker. So if we do see an Artist, we might just see another Merciless Storm.
Oh, that's actually not. Yeah, no, there's definitely a precedent to that. I've even seen one, I believe, in a European tournament, where one survivor missing one merciless skill check literally set the entire team ablaze, and they lost because of one skill check. It's really, really crazy. On killers that can inflict that kind of pressure on gens across the map, keep in mind, Azeroth's resting place is a perfectly flat map. There are no gens that can ever spawn on different elevation. So that's what makes the Artist such an attractive pick here. Then again, we're talking a lot about Artists, but other killers could easily happen as well. With limited heals and limited boon options, Twins becomes really, really scary. And in fact, I'm sure you've seen no shortage of Twins destroying survivors in this map.
Yeah.
And Wesker and Oni, I think it all comes down to just how incredible that player handles the chase. There's not so much macro, it's all about how much you can get that first hit as Oni, and how well you can control survivors with your bounce as Wesker.
Yeah, the biggest thing about Oni, and we see it time and time again, we have actually not seen a lot of Onis in the finals of DbDCC because it really just comes down to that first hit. Well, Wesker has laking pressure with inoculations. Artist has map-wide pressure. If we're looking at everything that the killers are able to offer, Oni just falls so far behind if he just is not able to get that first hit. So it's going to be interesting to see if we do see an Oni, because when we see Onis that are confident, that know what they're doing, who are able to get that first hit early and use their power to the nth degree, I mean, it is some amazing gameplay. So if we do see an Oni, it's definitely going to be a treat, I can promise you that.
And even if you have a bad game, I recall very vividly, I believe in the previous edition of the NA American Cups, we had a finals where the Oni played. I believe it was the previous one.
Yep.
And we had a match where survivors routinely denied him of his power. They achieved very, very little. They lost almost every gen, had a bit of a 3-gen, and then proceeded to hit the same gen with Eruption like 20 times. It was insane. I aged 5 years watching that game, and I'm pretty sure the survivors aged that much playing it themselves. It was crazy. So with a killer like that, even after a bad start, survivors cannot rest easy.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to say the least, but that being said, we are still waiting on the final results. Right now, it's looking like between Original or Karma will be going up against Petroleum, so they'll hopefully be wrapping up soon. With that being said, we are gonna go on just a little bit of break. We might come on back and do some more DbD comp analysis for y'all here today. With that being said, we'll see you guys in just a little bit.